people continually said, "Oh, you're pioneers," and I don't look at myself, or our team didn't look at ourselves as pioneers. We were really just test flying an aeroplane to see if it was any bloody good. Yeah, hi, my name's Barrie Rogers. I got into aviation literally when I was 8 years old with a school teacher taking students on flights on the afternoons and weekends, and that sort of set the scene, I guess, for where I am today in terms of the future. And I grew up always dreaming about flying, and finally got my pilot's licence at around 17, I think it was. I was moved to the United States when I was 27, I think it was. To manage a company I was involved with back in Australia, and had a great time over there. I bought my first aeroplane at 28, a good old Cessna 172, which I really loved the aircraft. And then home came calling a few years later, and I thought, well, I'd get back to Australia, and I'd been away at that point just on 10 years. So we acquired an electric aeroplane privately, with the view to putting it into the flight training sort of fleet at Parafield to show the people around and the communities that the future is coming, and it's going to get a bit quieter around here over time. That's what we can do. I know what we'll do. We'll fly around South Australia and we'll put it through its paces. So over the course of several months, we investigated the route we would take, the distances between each airport, and certainly the amount of charge time, and what did that look like as an overall project, I suppose. So we ultimately, over a 6-day period, we had to find 24 airports or places to land between literally Parafield Airport and Port Lincoln Airport, and of course I didn't want to repeat the travel that we went over there and all the airports and just repeat or retrace our steps. So we found another 24 places to land on the way back in order to make sure we had a circular trip rather than a one-way each way trip. And that was a challenge. It was a heck of a challenge. I recall our first landing was a gravel airstrip in Lower Light on the way up the coast there. Our second one was a gliding airstrip. I think it was gravel as well, in a place called Balaclava. Our third one was actually a friend of mine's wheat station or wheat property, wheat farm, and he flies himself, so he's got a patch cut out of the wheat to land aircraft in. And the fourth one on the day was Port Pirie Airport, which was a nice big long sealed runway. So that's indicative of what the trip was like. It was probably the best adventure, I think, that we had. And the day 2 of that trip, we encountered some heavy sleet. We encountered high winds. The second day of that trip took us through some very interesting places. We had a few gravel airstrips, a couple of farm paddocks, another wheat field before we saw the asphalt again, about halfway to Port Lincoln. The third day, very, very windy and gusty, but again, we followed our ultimate goal of not deviating from our original course. And we finalised the trip on day 3 in Port Lincoln for an overnight stay, which we intended to stay there and then literally fly back the following day. Unfortunately, the weather hemmed us in, so we were stuck in Port Lincoln for a couple of days. But the challenge of creating a trip like that and undertaking a trip like that, people continually said, "Oh, you're pioneers," and I don't look at myself, or our team didn't look at ourselves as pioneers. We were really just test flying an aeroplane to see if it was any bloody good. So that was it. On the way back, we again did a number of deviations from the intended airport just due to weather, but inadvertently, I suppose, we broke 3 world records as well. That was a really interesting thing, and the first one was basically distance over water for an electric plane. Now, we think about flying directly in most cases to the Eyre Peninsula straight across. We had to fly within range between Port Pirie and Whyalla, so didn't know that we were going to break that record, but we did, and we've broken it twice now, I think. On the return trip, we also broke the speed airspeed record for an electric plane anywhere at about 127 knots airspeed, about 170 kilometres an hour or so. And again, didn't really realise it until we'd done it. And we found out that, and one of the reasons I was motivated by this, that in Germany, a similar aircraft, the same model, some guys had done a record-breaking trip from Germany to Switzerland, I'm sorry, and it was about 750 kilometres, a bunch of Teslas with chargers in the back and flying up, roaring up freeways, and their landing issues were nowhere near as bad as ours were. So we thought, well, heck, let's just break that. So we ultimately doubled that record by flying 1,350 kilometres round trip to get back to Adelaide. Our final destination, having gone from dirt and gravel strips to landing on the main runway at Adelaide Airport, was a real coup. And of course, we've literally stopped within the piano keys and taxied off. But yeah, a lot of no scary moments at all. Everything was very well organised. We had, as I said, a great support crew, 8 of us all together, 3 aircraft, 2 vehicles. We had one of our pilots was also ex-military Air Force, and he was our route planner along with another lady, Catherine Conway, and between those two, they really managed to find us where we were going to be that night and where we were going to sleep. So it was quite an amazing journey. So that was part of my assessment of the aircraft for future use. And to be perfectly honest, the product is a great product. It has limited use. That drove me to thinking about what's next, what's the future, what's next, what can we do. And there was no other product around I could find on the marketplace anywhere globally that had a better range or was fit for purpose for what we wanted to use these aircraft for. So we set about, we thought, well, there's only one way to do this, and that's do it yourself. So I think 2 years after that trip, we formed another company to actually establish Australia's first electric plane production. That aircraft that we're now, we haven't test flown it yet, but we're in the processes of a completion for test flight, which means literally the things we learnt from the trip in 4 days over to Port Lincoln and back, knowing what we know now, having much quicker charging times of around about 15 minutes as opposed to an hour and a half, having a different range, and flying at lower power settings to not consume as much energy. We've calculated that trip now would be a full day's round trip on a summer day. So that's how far technology has actually come in 3 years. So we're pretty impressed with that. So I'm looking forward to, again, seeing what the future holds for everybody. This episode of Aviator Diaries has been brought to you by Adelaide Aviation. Check out adelaideaviation.com.au.